Hi everyone, I'm back with yet another video from the Season 26 PTR. This time I want to go more into detail of the Echoing Nightmare. So we have gotten together to try this out in 4-man as a team. Here's with Rax, Norvar and Rob. And we had an LOD Bombardment Crusader and an LOD Corpse Explosion Necro as our DPS here with 2 supports. We ended this one at Rave 193, which is quite high. As a reference, with my Raker Barb, I was able to do something like 160, 162 or so with like a few attempts. And here this was also our best run out of those, I don't know, 5 runs or so we've done. We had some others that ended like 170, 180, so somewhere along those lines. It does depend a little bit on the exact layout and also which monsters you're getting. There are some combos that are actually quite bad, like trees and some other like big and dangerous enemies in some cases. Also in this case, for example, we have those horn chargers. So we had a pretty good result, but those chargers are actually very dangerous. In any case, there is some RNG involved, but also we found out a few interesting things. So first of all, it seems like the rewards absolutely stop scaling after wave 150, while the monsters do not. So they continue to keep scaling up. I don't know exactly if this has the same scaling as Greater Rifts. It seems like there is kind of like a jump in difficulty every 50 levels, so that it's, you know, getting considerably harder after 100 and again after 150. And 150 is also the breakpoint where you get the most rewards possible, at least right now. This is a kind of weird system, so it just doesn't give you more, at least XP. I'm not 100% sure about the loot, but honestly, who really cares if you get like another item or so? So what matters is how much XP you get, and that is actually incredibly high. So it seems like to be a very consistent amount of around 800 billion XP that you can get for a wave 150 clear. And if you go higher than that, it doesn't seem to give you anything anymore. Baskinator, who's another streamer, he's a big Witch Doctor Blaster, he actually managed to get to wave 240 in 2-man with Mundunugo Witch Doctor and a ZDH, he told us, and he also got the same around 800 billion XP. So this is a kind of weird system, and it essentially punishes you for like trying harder and spending more time into this thing to try to push it to the maximum. So this is something that, in my opinion, is very counterintuitive. So the best strategy right now is actually to make a setup where you can like immediately blast to like wave 150 as fast as possible, which can be done in probably as little as like 2 minutes, and then you just die immediately. So this is probably the strategy. So you have like a super squishy setup. You click the shield pylon. There's always one of each pylon minus the speed in any of those corners. So you click the shield, then later you click the channel and the power, and then you just blast your way to 150. And if you timed as well, the shield pylon will run out exactly once you reach that, and you immediately die, and you immediately reset like this, instead of waiting like half a minute or so for this overwhelmed bar to fill up. I already mentioned some of those base mechanics in my other video, but just to reiterate here real quick, you basically spawn these waves on a timer. I don't know exactly if that's always the same, but it seems like if you kill them quickly, you spawn the next waves very quickly. You can also skip a lot of waves if you kill them quickly. So for example, if you have something like a multi-shot Marauder DH standing there blasting into all directions, you will immediately skip like 10 waves at a time until you don't one-shot everything anymore, and then the skips become smaller and smaller. And the slower you kill the enemies, the slower they spawn, and eventually this bar fills up if there's too many enemies and the encounter ends. While we're at it, I also had a lot of people talking about hardcore being very bad for this. There's absolutely no reason to assume that this is the case. You just make your normal regular build, you make it tanky for, you know, higher tier CGRs, and you're gonna be fine in here. And the worst case, there is still a shield pylon every single time. And if you're still going to die with a 2-minute shield pylon in this thing in hardcore, then I also can't help you. Anyway, we also tried some other funny stuff, and that was, for example, trying to carry over the pylons into Greater Rifts or vice versa. Seems like nothing works there. You can actually open a Greater Rift while in there, or you can like at least prompt the Greater Rift and then go in there, or vice versa. So you can have 2 things at the same time. But you can't actually leave the Echoing Nightmare unless you leave the game, and then I think you can come back after the encounter ends, but not during the encounter. So we tried all kinds of shenanigans with, exploiting this and maybe leeching as someone who leaves the game and comes back later, or who goes AFK. So it seems like you actually need to be there at the start of the encounter to get the benefits, and you also need to be there for the entire fight, so essentially, to gain any rewards. So you can't just go in and open it and go out and leech. So this is actually pretty good. Also the pylons, they actually get carried into a Greater Rift because you keep the pylons while you're in town, but as soon as you enter a Greater Rift, even if the rift was already open, they disappear after a few seconds, so you can't really do anything with them. So that's also pretty good. We also tried if there's any kind of weird scaling of Greater Rift rewards with this reward or something. That also doesn't seem to be the case. But overall, it's still kind of wonky if you happen to have a Greater Rift and an Echoing Nightmare at the same time. And additionally, you can actually start an Echoing Nightmare encounter with shrines. So since you can just go in there in T16 and collect some shrines, and for LOD builds in particular, or for solo builds, you can actually have shrines from the cow level, for example, like Empowered, Frenzy, Protection, and they will last 10 minutes, and they will last the entire duration in this Echoing Nightmare. So this is actually also quite curious. I think something that should be fixed if this is supposed to be any kind of competitive system. And that brings me to my next point. It doesn't really seem like there is much to it right now. The fact that the rewards stop scaling basically entirely, because there's no more XP at the very least, at 150 plus, makes it so that we don't really have to try very hard. Even my Paragon 800 Raker Barbarian can solo wave 150 quite reliably. I even go to like 160 quite easily at this point, and potentially even higher with some cases. So it doesn't seem very hard. A lot of builds will be able to do that. And on one hand, I think it kind of makes sense to give this target of 150, for example, or any other random number as kind of like the break point where maybe it doesn't become that rewarding anymore, but it shouldn't be like you get nothing and you actually waste your time entirely by trying to go further, because those later waves will also take more time to kill. You have to struggle, you have to actually like put the character at risk, for example in hardcore, because you might just be too squishy or something. So it seems like all this struggle doesn't really lead to anything besides wasting your time, which is a big issue here. At the very least, I would expect that there would be a leaderboard in that case, so that we can have at least some bragging rights, so that you can try to push very high when you are on a good run. So for example, you get like one of the better layouts like this one, and maybe one of the good monster combos, and you actually, take this opportunity to try to push as high as possible and then get ranked on leaderboard or so. Something like that would be cool at least, but as it is, it doesn't really seem like something that is really gonna be that exciting to do many times at the very least. The rewards are great in terms of XP. Potentially, if you optimize this and you get to wave 150, where you get 800 billion XP in as little as, let's say, 3 minutes, I believe, is probably possible. Then you can get 800 billion times 20. It's like 16 trillion XP in an hour, which is beyond what we know as like the highest XP per hour values from any speed meta ever, and really high Paragon, super optimized, with like no downtime. So it is definitely way above what you normally achieve when you just farm regularly, especially next season where we have the top builds nerfed and no soul shards. XP per hour values will across the board be way lower than what we know, and this is actually incredibly rewarding. So as long as you have the keys to open them, which actually drop extremely frequently, in fact I think it's a 100% chance from a Greater Rift right now to get one of those keys, you can potentially just rush through, GR90s or whatever, get your gear there, get like, 1 minute runs going all day long, and then you have like, 200 of those keys stacked up, and you just lost the XP in those Echoing Nightmares. But for that, it is a bit too bland, it's a bit too little action simply, and there's not really that much going on. The whole concept of it seems like it has a lot of potential, but I think the implementation is simply lacking some more excitement, some more action, some RNG, some elites, I don't know. There needs to be something that makes it a bit more than just standing in the middle and trying to get to wave 150 as fast as possible, in my opinion. If you have any ideas what that could be, what the devs could change, feel free to comment, and maybe we can, you know, find some good solutions, find some cool ideas, and the devs might listen and actually do something. But this is just what I have to share here. There's also one other thing that I want to highlight, and this is actually those mini bosses here, as you can see. So I think once during the encounter, or maybe it respawns at a later point again, there will be one of those shadows spawning, which is probably supposed to be like the shadow of the fallen Nephilim, of this echoing nightmare thing. So this is kind of like an enemy that doesn't really fight you, so it just runs away, or it just sometimes like stands AFK in a corner or something like that. But this is actually a quite important piece of the puzzle as well. So it's a little bit of a gimmick, and when you kill that one, you essentially explode the entirety of the whole pool, and you skip immediately like 20 waves or something. So this is another tool that you can use to actually like time well and then push quite high. So if you get like one of these guys and it spawns at, let's say, wave 100, it will not have very much HP, and you will be able to kind of leave it outside somewhere, and then as you start struggling later, after you have clicked all the pylons, after you have run out of shield and power and stuff like that, you have like one big pool, you're almost overwhelmed, you get this guy in and blast him down, and it will pop the entire screen, and then you get another few waves. I'm gonna fast forward here real quick. So you see this is the time where we pull this Nephilim guy into the monsters, and then we start to blast it down. This is like, you know, towards the end of our pylons, because we were starting to struggle, and we exploded, and then you see like this little like AoE appear here, and boom, everything got wiped. So this is how that works. So this is a kind of interesting gimmick here, and I believe if there was like, you know, maybe some other stuff going on with some kind of, you know, power-ups that you can get, or, you know, something that also helps you, not just makes it more difficult for you, that could also be quite interesting, where there's a bit of strategy involved and not just, again, standing in the middle trying to kill everything as fast as possible. To wrap up this video, I gotta say that Echoing Nightmares, I think, have some potential to just stay in the game permanently as a kind of like maybe rare reward, where, you know, every once in a while you find one of these keys and you feel good about it because you get tons of XP and maybe tons of loot and some exciting stuff. But right now it doesn't really feel that exciting when I think about just actually farming this 4 hours on end after stacking up those keys in the actual season. I think that it's just gonna be a bit too bland, and it doesn't feel that rewarding. It's just nice XP, the loot is nothing special, so maybe there could also be something done there, so it always drops, you know, only primals, or, you know, it maybe doesn't drop much, but maybe one primal guaranteed after wave 100, and then you have the chance for a second primal up to wave 200, and then if you even go beyond 200, maybe get the chance for a third primal or something like that. Or maybe it only drops the items that you have equipped on your character, so that you can kind of like target farm the gear that you want. So potentially you might even want to go in there with some other builds that are not your main build, so to try to get those. So for example, you want to push Inna, Uliana and Raymond Monk, so you actually try to maybe even make a Raymond Monk setup to go as far as possible and get some items for your Raymond Monk if you want to gear that up. So there could also be stuff like that that would actually make it a quite interesting game mode, because then you actually have a reason to play other builds, you have a reason to try very hard with some of them to even get to 150 or get as high as possible, because it gives you a higher chance for more items. So I don't know, there could be tons of little changes in rewards as well, and not just in the actual gameplay. For now, it feels like it is simply unfinished. It needs some work both in how the fights are, how the gameplay feels, and also how the rewards feel, because everything is a kind of unintuitive, and in the long run it's not gonna feel that great to just play this like 100 times or more on end, especially if this is supposed to be the season theme. We had this funny bug about the legendary gems they could socket into your armor. I think something like this could be an actual kind of funny idea for like a last minute implementation of a season theme, to just take that as the season theme and then have this Echoing Nightmare as like a permanent system that maybe gets iterated on over time. Because personally I think this is definitely a good start for a new type of endgame, a new type of system, but it needs to kind of find its own place in the game. And obviously the first iteration, I wouldn't really expect them to perfectly hit the mark of that. And with, you know, further improvements, not just this patch, but also in the future, this could actually become pretty cool and interesting if it has like its own purpose in the game. So this is what I had to share here for this video. I'll keep you guys updated with more videos from the PTR. Hope you liked that one, and see you guys next time.